What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to go back over subnetting, and we're going to dive deeper into it just a bit based on the first video where I tried to make a comparison between subnetting and using Yu-Gi-Oh to kind of animate that example and to make it a little more easy to translate for those who are unfamiliar with it. So this video is going to build on that video. So like I said, in a previous video, we went over the concept of subnetting, and I attempted to use Yu-Gi-Oh to paint a better picture of how subnetting works, primarily the concept of subnet masking. To summarize, subnetting is when you take, like the whole pizza or pie example, you take a network, a computer network, and you split it off into chunks. And each of those chunks usually has a specific use that leads to like why you're segmenting it, because you want to separate it from the rest of the devices on your network. That way it's more secure, things flow more easily and stuff like that. Now, hopefully I won't ruffle any feathers here, but this is the same concept that I hear a good amount of people use when it comes to dating, just hanging out with people and spending time with people. There are some people who, even with friend groups, they have some people that are good for professional reasons. They have people that are good for financial reasons. They have people that are good for primarily, let's say, real estate advice, tech advice, fitness advice, right? Friend groups that one group of friends you may have met because y'all all came from the same city. Then you have another group of friends that you just met in general in college, but they're two separate groups, right? Then you have your fraternities and your sororities. You know what I mean? You have these different groups that all contribute to your life, but they're split apart because they have their different, one, the different ways that y'all connected in the first place, and two, they have the different purposes that they serve in your life. Computer systems work in the same way when it comes to subnetting. In particular, we're going to focus again on subnet masking and build on that concept like we did for the first video. So subnet masking is what happens when you take that network and you split it off into chunks, and you separate those chunks based on particular usage. But what subnet masking also does, or rather what subnetting also does, is it takes the IP address, and we also touched on this in the first video a bit. It takes an IP address, and you usually have in what's called an IPv4 or Internet Protocol version 4 IP address. The numbers are usually split off into fours. So you usually have a 2 to 3 digit number, period, 2 to 3 digit number, period, and then that repeats 2 more times. So it's IPv4, so you have 4 numbers. That should make it easy to remember. Now, what subnet masking does is it kind of turns that IP address into an ID card, and depending on your particular usage and how you set things up, you should be able to look at an IP address and instantly know what it's used for, or at least have an idea of what subnet it belongs to, which still gives you an indication of what it's used for. In the first video, we didn't go into the details about that, even though we touched on it. So now we're going to go into the details of what a segmented or subnetted IP address looks like and what the different components of it are. We're going to focus on 2 main parts. The first part is what's called a host address. So the host address is kind of what we touched on before, where you have 1, 2, or 3 numbers that basically lets you know the identity of the particular device, whether that's your laptop, my Mac Mini, for example, your phone, all these things. The host address lets you know particularly what device you are referring to. The second part is what's called a network address, which is basically the same thing, but it lets you know kind of a bit on a bigger scale what network is this device a part of. So for the same reasons when it comes to like security, network performance, making sure that there's no latency or it reduces latency in a network, which again increases a network's performance. Those are all reasons why people use subnetting and use subnet masking when it comes to being able to identify, 1, which subnet does a device belong to, and 2, what subnet are you looking at in general. And we kind of touched on this before. So again, we're going to run with the same example. If you have a 1.1.1.1 IP address, IPv4 address, depending on how you have it set up, because this is where IP address classes come into play, but we're not going to touch on that yet. But for the sake of argument, we're going to focus on what's called a Class C IP address, which basically makes it so that the first 3 numbers identify the network, and that last number identifies the device. If you have the 1.1.1.1 IP address, that 1.1.1, that could be devices that you use at home, versus 2.2.2, those can be devices at your personal office for content creation. 3.3.3 if you keep devices at your professional office, like a corporate office. Those are devices that you use there. Just by using those first three numbers, you will be able to determine where those devices are located and why you use them. And those first three numbers are what's known as the network address. Now that fourth number, that's going to be what's called the host address. That tells you what particular device you're looking at. It's up to you how to set it up. But if you have 1.1.1, okay, this is a personal device. This is a device that I keep at home. But now if it says .1 on the very last one, you know, maybe on my personal priority, what's a device that I have with me all the time? My cell phone. So 1.1.1.1 would be my cell phone that I use at home, you know, it's for personal use. But then if I switch to 1.1.1.2, okay, based on priority, that could be my personal MacBook. 1.1.1.3, that might be my work laptop because I work remote, so that might be my work laptop, you know, even though there are other things that go into that. But for the sake of argument, let's just say that would be my work laptop because I use it from home. 1.1.1.4 would be my PlayStation 4. Again, this is where IP address classes come into play, but we're going to focus on what's called the Class C part of it. So Class C IP addresses, I will give you this much. The Class C IP addresses are the ones where if you're looking at 4 different numbers in an IP address, IPv4, the first 3 numbers is the network address. That lets you know what network these devices are a part of. That very last number, the 4th number, is the host address and just talks about which device is which in particular. Now, in terms of daily operations and like different job titles that understanding this will be helpful for, it comes down to a few different things, but I came up with 2 main ones that came to mind. Understanding subnet, or rather IP address classes and subnet masking and things like that, I would say is primarily useful on the technical side of infotech and just tech jobs in general. So if you're going into, say, network architecture or network engineering, or their cloud counterparts like cloud architect, cloud engineer, things like that, then understanding this concept will most likely apply to you. But if you're on my side of things, which is kind of a mix of IT operations and IT service management, which is basically the business side of infotech, but we still use a bit of networking knowledge to understand why certain things go wrong, and I have to go over the cases that get handed to me on a daily basis, then understanding this would still be helpful, but you're not going to be configuring servers and creating subnets and things on a day in, day out basis. So you don't need to know it quite as intimately as a network engineer or a network architect or their cloud counterparts, but it would still be helpful information for you to know. And again, everything has its pros and cons, but if we're focusing on the pros of subnetting and subnet masking, there are a few main reasons to do it. So, you know, if you're looking to get into cybersecurity, this will be a concept you definitely want to know, because splitting a network into subnets, or segmentation basically, is a key component of network security and therefore cybersecurity or information security. You also have reduced network traffic, which in turn increases network performance. So those are just a few examples of what understanding this concept would be useful for, you know, if you were looking to get into infotech, infosec in particular, and even then infosec has its own specialties beyond it. So it's up to you at that point what you want to do. But yeah, guys, we went ahead and built off of the subnetting concept from the first video. Hope this was helpful for you. If you have any comments, feedback, or anything for me, share that with me in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.